Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. With every day that passes, we are feeling the impacts of COVID-19 in our communities and in our homes. As a parent, I understand the concerns and the anxiety that island families and children are feeling. Like most parents and caregivers, my children are asking me questions about this extraordinary situation that we are living through. And like most of you, I have questions myself about my children's education and how we can support them and how we can support island children who rely on the supports traditionally provided within our schools. This is a new situation that as islanders in a government that we have never faced, and we are trying to adapt quickly and to work together so that all islanders, in particular children, have the supports they need to be healthy and safe. We have a duty to ensure that our children learn. Island parents and students have expectations of our education system. These have not changed, even though we need to modify the approach to reflect today's situation. COVID-19 presents a number of challenges, new challenges, compared to other extreme situations or emergencies that we have faced. Most importantly, it's because COVID-19 requires physical distancing, which keeps us from interacting with each other in person, an action that is very important in teaching. In spite of this, we need to keep our children learning. The Department of Education and Lifelong Learning has been working closely with the school boards, both English and French, as well as teachers and principals to identify what we need to know, what we need to do now with the resources that we have to support our children learning while they're at home. I want island parents and teachers and students to know that we are working to strike the right balance to ensure students are supported, that teachers have the necessary academic tools, and that families are not overwhelmed. We also know that schools are more than just places where our children learn. For many, schools are a sanctuary, where some of our children get their first meal of the day, an important step to help them learn, and where children can reach out when needed to counselors to confide in or get help from. While Minister Trivers will speak more to this in a few moments, I want island parents, teachers, and students to know that we are putting measures in place to ensure access to these important supports will continue. We are all in this together. I want to assure you that we will get through this together, and we will continue to work side by side to create solutions that support families and children. And just before I pass things over to Minister Trivers, I do have an important message for the high school class of 2020. We don't know what these next weeks and months will look like. And I know that this is not how you envisioned your grade 12 year. I know that this is the time where you are preparing to make decisions on what you will do next year, what school you may go to, or what journey you may embark on as you take the next steps in your lives. But to the class of 2020, I promise you this. You will be afforded the same privilege of having a prom and a graduation ceremony as every class that went before you and every class that will come after you. Some of my fondest memories are from 30 years ago as part of the 1990 class at Montague High School. Both prom and graduation provided me the opportunity to reflect on my successes, to prepare me for the future, and to celebrate important friendships, many which continue to this very day. I will not allow COVID-19 to rob you, the class of 2020, of these important celebrations. They may occur at a different time, they may look a little bit differently, but I promise you that you will look back on these celebrations, as we are all fortunate to do, for the rest of your lives, and to be reminded of the people, the moments, and the smiles that make high school some of the best years of your life. And with that, I'll pass it over to Minister Trivers.
Well, thank you, Premier. And first of all, I wanted to talk about emergency childcare services for our essential workers. So in partnership with the Early Childhood Development Association, we have been working with the early learning and childcare workforce to respond to the critical need for childcare services for essential workers. And under the direction of Dr. Heather Morrison and her team at the Chief Public Health Office, health and safety protocols are in place for centers that will be opening their doors. I want to give a huge thank you to the Early Childhood Development Association and the hundreds of early childhood professionals, as well as department staff, who have been engaged in this process, and to the centers and their staff who have stepped up to help. Childcare services for essential workers will begin this week and will continue to grow as centers are ready to go. Center-based childcare will be provided for children over 2 who are not immunocompromised. Alternatively, for those children, in-home childcare will be supported for these children and families. So staff have been in touch with essential workers who have indicated they need childcare, and we will continue to work directly with them to respond to their needs. Again, I want to send a thank you to the early childhood professionals and the ECDA who are working tirelessly with us to ensure childcare is provided to our essential workers during this very challenging time. Next, I wanted to talk about home learning. And as well here, I want to say a thank you to parents, students, and staff who have already been hard at work helping children learn at home over the last couple of weeks. We can appreciate that parents, students, and teachers have a lot of questions regarding how school closures will impact learning. And it's important to recognize this situation is new to everyone and is something that we have never done before. So we are trying to find the right balance between ensuring learning continues for students and not overwhelming families during this difficult time. So I want to assure you that any learning gaps as a result of COVID-19 will be addressed and students will be able to progress to the next grade level. And we will provide every opportunity for grade 12 students to graduate and pursue post-secondary learning. So starting April 6th, teachers will be taking the lead on home learning activities. And teachers will continue to connect with students in a way that works best for all involved. So this may involve a variety of online and offline home learning materials, and we will provide them to you. So regardless of your access to the internet, you can still continue learning. And you know, most of these will require nothing more than a paper and a pencil at the kitchen table. We understand that home learning is difficult for parents, and we don't want you to worry about your children falling behind. Try your best, and when schools reopen, your children will be supported so they can move forward with their learning. So our Director of English Education Programs and Services, Dr. Tamara Hubley-Little, is here with us today to provide more detail regarding what home learning will look like for the duration of the school closures. And in order to prioritize the delivery of at-home learning, I wanted to also announce that we've decided to cancel all provincial assessments for the school year. And this does include the Delft French Language Schools Assessment and the early years evaluations, which assess readiness for kindergarten. So I wanted to talk next about something that I think the Premier alluded to, and these are the supports for students through our Student Services Department at the Education Authorities. So in addition to our focus on curriculum, some students really rely on additional supports. Our main priority remains the health and well-being of families and children during the time away from school and early years centers. We understand that families are facing a tough situation. And for those struggling, I mean, it's even harder now. School counselors and psychologists are working together to get in contact with students who may need support. Schools are setting up virtual student services, the meetings to support students. And Student Services has also started a Facebook page with tips and videos to support children and families at this time. So it's students and their families who are feeling vulnerable and need support during school closure. Please do not hesitate to reach out to 902-368-5155 or email supportforfamilies@edu.pe.ca. And of course, additionally, children and youth may also continue to call the Kids Helpline, 1-800-668-6868. And I should mention that we are going to have a frequently asked questions page up on our website, possibly tonight, but for sure tomorrow morning, so you can get all this information and answer some other questions you may have. Lastly, I really wanted to talk about support for those that have food insecurity. We know that some of our students rely on our school food programs. So we want to thank all the community organizations and businesses who have been stepping up to provide food support for our children and families. And I'm pleased to announce that this week, as many will already know, nutritious prepared meals and snacks will be provided to families who register for support. Meals will be prepared by Chef Steve Wilson from the P.E.I. School Food Pilot at the Kincora Regional High School, and those will then be distributed across the island. If you require this support, again, please call 902-368-5155 or email supportforfamilies@edu.pe.ca. And I just want to be clear that the information I'm giving is for both education authorities, the public schools branch, and the Commission scolaire de langue française. Also wanted to say that to complement these great efforts to address food insecurity, we are partnering with the P.E.I. Home and School Federation and the Breakfast Club of Canada to assist as many families and children as possible during the COVID-19 crisis. So now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Tammy Hubley-Little to provide an update on the home learning rollout. Tammy?
Thank you, Minister Trivers. Learning for our students will continue. Department staff are supporting teachers in compacting their courses and curricula. In kindergarten through grade 9, teachers will prioritize literacy and numeracy. Physical health and well-being will be outside of the instructional time being planned. Students will continue to use the resources provided by the department website for physical health and well-being. Starting April 6th, home learning will transition from the department resources provided through the website to teachers. Teachers at the kindergarten level will be providing a total of 30 minutes of holistic learning material for our youngest students each day. Teachers at the primary level will be providing a total of 45 minutes of instruction and learning materials per day. Literacy and numeracy instruction will focus on the foundational learnings. Teachers at the elementary level will be providing a total of 60 minutes of instruction and learning materials per day. As well, literacy and numeracy instruction will focus on the foundational learnings. Teachers at the intermediate level will be expected to provide a total of 90 minutes of instructional material per day, focusing on literacy, numeracy, social studies, and science. Teachers at the high school level will be providing no more than 2 hours of learning material per course each week. This will include instructional and study and practice time. We encourage parents and students to continue to refer to the department website for support and other resources to complement home learning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Tammy. I would like to, just before we go to take questions, to say a really proud tip of the hat to staff in education and lifelong learning. This has been, for them, like everybody else, an unprecedented time, and how they have responded to this has really been it's something that I've taken a whole lot of pride in, certainly, so I wanted to pass that along. And with that, I will say we can open this up to questions from the media who have joined.
Brittany Spencer, CBC. Hi, yes. So my question is about childcare. So are childcare workers who are asked to return to provide care for children of essential workers, are they required to come back to work, or can they choose not to work, given that there are some risks involved? In which case, would they still be eligible for any financial assistance for people that are out of work?
Take that. So thank you for your question. And no early child care worker is required to come back to work. We're asking them to volunteer to do that. And of course, the supports that we've already announced will continue.
Okay, and I guess as a follow-up to that, how many workers are you hoping to have to support these child care services?
Well, that's a really good question. It's It's a number that I don't have in front of me right now, but in the neighborhood of 150 to 200, I would say would be a good estimate.
And can you, just to clarify, can you tell me how many that you have volunteered? Do you have that number? Like how many you have ready to start working for this program at this point?
For you, we're still contacting all centers and workers. I believe the last number I had was 20 different centers that have said they're interested in opening, and they're working with the workers for those centers to see who can staff them.
And if I could just follow up on that, Brittany, I know that the minister and his staff have been working with the Early Childhood Development Association, who have been having some meetings with their members. Of course, health and safety is a primary concern for everybody, including those individuals. So the conversations have been being held and will continue to be held. Dr. Morrison, I know, was on the first call. Staff from Public Health have been on the subsequent calls as well. And I think it's important to point out that to Sonia Hooper and her association and all of the members, just how grateful we are. They recognize the need that is here, and we just continue to work through that process. And I tip my hat to the minister leading this charge. It's been a delicate file, to say the least. I think, Brad, it would be fair to say, but we're making good progress there, and we're hoping that continues.
Thank you very much.
Nicole Williams, CBC.
Hi there. You said that the teaching would now be in the hands of teachers, like this new, I guess, at-home based learning. Are they responsible for developing the curriculum? Are you providing that for them? What does that look like exactly? What exactly are they responsible for?
Tammy, do you want to? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicole. So we will continue to support teachers in the delivery of the provincial curriculum. So teachers will not be developing their own curriculum. Rather, we are going to take the existing curriculum and we will be what we call compacting it. So we're identifying key learnings for the next 5 weeks that we would want teachers to work on with their students in the home learning situation.
And you mentioned that most of this would just require a pencil and a paper. Mm-hmm. I know, again, there's a concern for students who don't have access to internet. How are they supposed to mm-hmm. access even just the lessons if they don't have a good mm-hmm. internet connection? Yeah. How are you getting those plans from teachers to students?
Mm-hmm. So one of the first things that teachers will be doing and have actually been doing is to contact students and find out what kind of access that they do have. And once teachers have that information, they'll be able to identify the best way to provide those learning materials to students.
Thank you. Steve Neepy, The Guardian.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. Question for Minister Trivers, I guess, about childcare. So you'd mentioned that childcare will be offered to essential workers. I mean, looking over the essential services in P.E.I, it's quite a broad range of workers. I mean, are we really talking about all essential workers or just healthcare staff?
Well, thanks, Stu. And it really is all essential workers. It's both public and private sector, and it's not just health staff, although I believe it's about 80% of those who have registered for emergency childcare are, in fact, health workers in the health sector.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're talking about people who are working in convenience stores or grocery stores. They would be eligible for this program as well.
That's correct, and we've had the registration form up now for. The days are running together a bit. I believe it's about a week, and so we believe all the workers that would need the care for their children have registered, and that is absolutely correct. It's all essential workers.
Okay, thank you.
Carrie Wynn McLeod, Ocean 100.
Good afternoon, folks. Minister Trivers, you mentioned that Dr. Morrison had some protocols in place for those early childhood centers, daycares, and you mentioned that you expect them to be operating soon. When would that be? And as you mentioned earlier, there are 20 centers. That's right across the province. And what exactly are those protocols that would need to be in place for those centers to be operational?
Okay, well, thank you. That's a lot of questions there. So, as the Premier was saying, we've been working really closely, and the staff's doing just a fantastic job working with the Early Childhood Development Association and the early childhood educators, and really that was one of their main concerns. Was the safety, as you can imagine, being asked to go in and look after children, which let's face it, it's hard to socially distance when you have young children, and so the recommendations of the Chief Public Health Officer were absolutely key, and that's why, as the Premier said, there's been two meetings that each one of them attended by hundreds of early childhood educators, where Dr. Morrison herself, as well as staff from the Chief Public Health Office, have addressed those protocols and answered questions from early childhood educators. And so an example, and I don't have a list of all the protocols here though, you would have no more than 5 people in a room, and that would include the workers themselves. So you might have an early childhood educator with 4 children, for example. That would be the maximum in a room. I think another rule is there'd be no food preparation within a center, an emergency childcare center. I think you also talked about I said 20 centers is what we're at right now, and whether they're across the province. And of course, they will need to be across the province, and that's what we're working towards. As you might suspect, the areas with the most need are the larger population areas of the province, and I think that's probably where they're centered now. But I don't know, Premier, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think those are, solid responses. I think as we learn more about the concerns and we address those concerns from the Early Childhood Development Association through their membership, we're able to help, to alleviate some of those concerns, and more centers are becoming interested in participating. They also recognize the importance of the essential workforce and the role that their members need to play. So I think Brad points out quite rightly that I think Charlottetown, Summerside, and Stratford, if I'm operating off of my best memory, are the 3 primary areas of the highest population that would require this particular service. But it is a service that will be required to some extent across the province, and we're just going to continue to work with the Early Childhood Development Association to help address as many of these concerns as we can, and to offer as many of these placements as possible as soon as we can.
So you're hoping, Mr. Premier, to have that, at least some of those centres ready to go by the end of the week? And is it going to be the kind of thing where it might just end up being staggered openings across the province?
Oh, I think I'll let the minister tackle the second part of it, but I think it is pretty realistic that it will be a staggered opening, simply because it'll take more and more time for individual centers and professionals to come on board. But I do think we're operating under the hope that as soon as possible. I don't know if that's a hard and fast day, whether that's Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, but we're really hoping that it's as soon as possible. But maybe Brad has more.
I mean, I don't have a lot to add to that, but that's definitely the case. We have essential workers who are providing essential services, whether it be healthcare or at the convenience store, and we need to allow them to do their job, and part of that is childcare. And so that's why we're asking early childhood educators to come out and provide that service, and we want to do that as soon as possible. I fully expect we'll see centers start opening tomorrow. It's very challenging, and I should mention this is not unique to Prince Edward Island. All across the country, every jurisdiction is dealing with the same issues, and we've been in contact with them, and we're all facing these challenges. And if we work together to address them, I think we can come through and continue to serve islanders, especially on the healthcare front, through this crisis.
So that's the essential childcare places. And just one question for Dr. Hubley-Little. I'm just wondering, can you just maybe go over what the plan is for those high school students again, please?
So, Carrie, we do have 5 weeks in front of us where students will be continuing with their home learning journey. And part of that will be to focus on those essential outcomes that I referenced earlier. So beyond that, I think is the essence of your question. Our high school students will be given every opportunity. And I want to express my confidence in teachers to be able to do this. It's what they do day in and day out, and given very difficult circumstances ahead of them, they are rising to this occasion, and they will continue to provide the learning materials and support students in the next 5 weeks. But they will continue beyond that to address those learning gaps so that students at the high school level, whether they're in grade 12 and moving on to post-secondary or the workforce, or whether they're in grade 10 or 11 and moving to the next grade. We do have a plan in place. I want to assure students and families that we have a plan in place. And students will not be disadvantaged because of COVID-19. And I have every confidence in our education system to address this.
That's great. I guess specifically, I was looking at just, was it 2 hours per course per week, Tam?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sean McDougall, Eastern Graphics.
Good evening, everyone. This question is for Dr. Hubley. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little more on how children with inadequate internet access are supposed to get their learning materials from teachers. As you said, the teachers will be deciding how to get those materials, but is there any methods that the province is requesting that they use?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. We do recognize that there's an inequity in access to technology across our student population, and I'd say we have that inequity with our teachers as well. So it's not an even playing field, and in response to that, I've asked the team members to come up with materials that can be provided to students that won't require technology that is internet-based. So there will be a variety, and I think to go back to your question on how do you get materials to students who don't have any access. So we're exploring that. We're looking at a number of opportunities, including the telephone. What do print materials look like for students? How do we go about exploring a distribution of print materials in a safe way? And so we're in those conversations. We are exploring different options for our students to receive materials who are not in the position to engage with their teacher over the internet. And the first step, of course, will be to determine which students are in that situation, and then we'll know what we need to do to address that.
Okay, and I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on who's discussing these ideas on how to get the materials to kids. Are teachers having a voice in this conversation?
So teachers will be having a voice. So as of yesterday, we've started to engage teachers. As you know, the Department of Education and Lifelong Learning took the lead on the home learning work once school closures were announced. And so going forward, as of yesterday and moving forward, teachers will be very much engaged in that. The Teachers Federation has been partnering with us in these conversations. The school authorities have been very much engaged in these conversations. And of course, the Chief Health Officer, who ultimately will provide us with direction on what we can accomplish given the protocols that are in place.
And if I could just add on to that.
Thank you.
A number of Islanders have reached out to me with suggestions and ideas. I just want to thank Islanders for that, because we are truly all working together to try and make sure our students can learn. And I know there's some media outlets that have reached out as well, and we look forward to providing some what will be truly innovative solutions going into the future. Of course, always working with the Chief Public Health Officer to make sure it's safe.
Laurent Rigaud, La Voix chrétienne.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. you said that online and printed home learning materials will be provided. Does it mean that to reach the 60-minute learning per day, for instance, elementary school students will be able to choose whether they want to do that online or offline?
Thank you for the question. What we've asked teachers to do is to provide a variety of materials that would support learning. So if a teacher identifies that his or her class has access to the internet, we can provide the materials to students. But I want to take this opportunity to say that we know our children and our students are engaged in a lot of social media and online presence because of the isolation they are experiencing. And so one of the things we have asked teachers to think very deliberately about is to provide learning opportunities that would take students offline. And so it isn't necessarily about whether a student has the access, but it's about providing a balanced opportunity for students to engage in learning materials that won't require them to be online, and give them a break from that, because it can be quite challenging. We're also very aware that in any given family, we might have parents working from home that require access to the internet and the technology that's available. There may be multiple siblings in the home environment that will need to have access across the day to complete home learning materials. And so when teachers are developing these materials, we've asked them to take all of that into consideration, and that is partly why we've identified the time frames we have for students to engage in learning. You know, a typical school day is 5 hours, and yet at the high school we're looking at 2 hours per course. And we have done that very deliberately because the context, the home situation, can be so dynamic that we need to be respectful of what's happening in the home while we are providing quality learning materials for students. So I know it's a bit of a complicated and convoluted response, but it's not as simple as paper and pencil versus online. So many factors are going to be at play here as we move forward over these next 5 weeks.
Is there something planned for children with specific needs? I spoke with parents who have autistic children, and they are very worried about the consequences of COVID-19 on the learning for their children.
I'm going to pass that back over to Minister Trivers, who has some information.
Okay, no, thank you for that question. And so really that's the student services support we're talking about, and already really, you know, school counselors and psychologists, as well as other staff within student services, are reaching out because they know who these students are, and they know those families, and reaching out to them on an individual basis to help. And that's how we're addressing that, and helping the best way they can, and to make sure that, you know, for example, students that have autism can have the supports they need.
Thank you.
Merci. Julien Lecacheur, Radio-Canada.
Question for Minister Trivers. Minister Trivers, what is the cost of that? Is it inside the $2 million package that you announced maybe 1 week ago?
Well, I mean, we haven't allocated any really additional funding for the home learning piece, but Premier, did you have some
I just wanted the clarification. Do you mean for the essential childcare or for the educational component here?
Yeah, I'm just curious if there is a link between the $2 million funding that you announced 1 week ago about the childcare and with the home learning, and if there's not a link, what will be the cost, the extra cost for the province of the home learning?
Yeah. So on the home learning front, we're expecting to be able to deliver it within the existing budget that we've outlined, and so far we haven't identified costs that would cause us to go outside that. But, you know, that doesn't mean that as we progress, and especially our hardworking teachers, as they work on the front lines and they engage students, and I do want to really give a huge shout out to the education authorities, their leadership, and the teachers for the work they're doing as they go out and they figure this out and they work through it. If they need additional supports, and we do have to allocate budget, I'm definitely going to bring that forward to the cabinet table.
Other question for you, Minister Trivers. We are speaking about a plan for the next 5 weeks for the home learning. You already said maybe 1 week ago that everybody will pass the year because you are working on this possibility that the kids won't go back to school this year. Is it still on your mind that everybody will pass this year?
Yes. So, really, it's we're all working in this together, and I mean, Tammy and her team within the department are really looking long term, and they're saying, how do we make sure students are successful long term? And so it means that when students do eventually return to schools, if there are learning gaps, and they have progressed to the next level, let me be clear that they will progress to the next grade level. If there are learning gaps, we're putting plans in place so they can be addressed at that time. And I don't know, Tammy, if you wanted to add anything to that?
Yeah. So just with respect to the graduation piece, so in the semester system that we have at the high school level in Prince Edward Island, we have had 6 weeks of instruction before students and teachers went on their break. And so we find ourselves with about 7 weeks, the 2 that we've just had and 5 in front of us. So about 7 weeks of instruction that we are looking to have as a home learning experience. However, if students do not return to the classroom on the 11th, and we need to follow the direction there of the Chief Public Health Office, but if students don't, we are working on a plan. We do have we're quite far progressed in that planning. And students who have been on a pathway to graduation and who had been engaged with their learning prior to the break will continue to have every opportunity to graduate. I talked about students not being disadvantaged in my previous comments. I'll reiterate those. So as long as students continue to engage with their learning that their teacher provides, whether it's for 5 weeks or more, students will graduate from Island High Schools. We're working very closely with our local post-secondary institutions on what that transition will look like. P.E.I. is in a very enviable position to be able to do that. I am very pleased with the flexibility that the University of Prince Edward Island and Holland College have demonstrated in the conversations we've had, and I really believe that our students will not be disadvantaged. So my message to students and parents, given your learning materials for the next 5 weeks, do what you can. Engage in a way that works for your family situation, and we will pick it up from there and provide you with your opportunities to graduate.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Brad and Tammy, for being here, and thank you to all Islanders for continuing to follow the advice of our Chief Public Health Office. So thank you.